What if the most dangerous weapon in the next global conflict wasn't a missile, wasn't a warship, and wasn't even an AI system trained on $100 billion worth of compute? What if it was a chip the size of your thumbnail that costs less than $1 to make? Think about that for a second. The United States is pouring hundreds of billions into the most advanced semiconductors ever designed, cutting-edge fabrication plants, next-generation AI processors. The kind of chips that can run large language models, simulate nuclear physics, and render entire digital worlds in real time. And while Washington is playing that game, China may have already won a completely different one, quietly, methodically, without firing a single shot. This is not a story about technology, this is a story about power. And the most dangerous kind of power is the kind nobody sees coming. Let me paint you a picture. It is 2019. A major American automaker, one of the most iconic brands in the world, is sitting on a factory floor full of nearly finished vehicles, engines installed, paint applied, interiors fitted, millions of dollars of labor and materials ready to ship, except they cannot ship them. Not a single one. Why? Because each car is missing one tiny component. A semiconductor chip, not a cutting-edge AI processor, not a quantum computing unit. Simple, cheap, unglamorous chip that controls the timing of an electronic system. A chip that, in bulk, costs less than a cup of coffee. That is not a hypothetical. Supply chain disruptions in 2021 caused exactly that kind of crisis, costing the global auto industry an estimated $210 billion in lost revenue, according to AlixPartners. $210 billion stopped cold by a chip that costs less than $1. If that does not make you stop and rethink everything you thought you knew about geopolitical power, nothing will. Here is the uncomfortable truth that nobody in Washington wants to say out loud. The global conversation about semiconductors is almost entirely focused on the wrong chips. When politicians talk about chip supremacy, they mean the most advanced nodes. The 2-nanometer and 3-nanometer processors coming out of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, known as TSMC and Samsung. The kind of chips that power your iPhone, your data center, your AI chatbot. The chips that require billions of dollars of equipment so precise it can etch features smaller than a strand of DNA. Those chips matter. Nobody is saying they do not. But here's what the headlines miss. The overwhelming majority of semiconductors produced and sold in the world today are not advanced chips. They are what the industry calls legacy chips. Older nodes. Simpler designs. Larger, tougher, cheaper to make. And they are inside virtually everything that keeps civilization running. Your car, your refrigerator, the traffic light you drove through this morning, the MRI machine at your hospital, the power substation 3 blocks from your house, the radio tower that connects your cell phone to the network. All of them absolutely dependent on legacy chips. These are not relics. They are the skeleton of the modern world. And right now, one country is quietly positioning itself to control that skeleton entirely. After 2018, when the United States began restricting China's access to advanced chip technology and manufacturing equipment, something interesting happened. China did not panic. China pivoted. Instead of throwing unlimited resources at the impossible task of catching up to TSMC's most advanced nodes overnight, Chinese policymakers made a calculated decision. They would dominate the market for the chips everyone actually needs. The simple ones, the durable ones. The ones that do not require extreme ultraviolet lithography machines that cost $150 million each. Legacy chip production does not need the newest equipment. It can be done on older machines, already paid for, already understood. The barrier to entry is lower. The path to scale is shorter. And if the government is willing to foot the bill for the factory, the economics become almost impossible to compete with. China moved fast. Between 2014 and 2023, China's share of global legacy chip production expanded significantly. By some estimates, China now accounts for roughly 30% of global legacy chip capacity, and that share is rising. The country is on track to build more semiconductor fabrication plants over the next few years than any other region on Earth. 30%, and climbing, let that settle. Now here is where the strategy gets genuinely clever. Or sinister, depending on your perspective. Chinese semiconductor manufacturers are not just building chips. They are building chips at prices nobody else can match. This is not a miracle of efficiency. It is a miracle of state subsidy. When the Chinese government wants a strategic industry to grow, it does not wait for the market to decide. It removes the biggest obstacles: factory construction costs, subsidized, land, discounted or provided outright, energy below market rate, tax burden, dramatically reduced, financing, available at rates no private investor could offer. In a normal market, building a semiconductor fabrication plant costs between $3 billion and $10 billion, depending on the technology. That is before a single chip is made. That upfront cost is the reason chip manufacturing consolidates over time. Only the biggest, best capitalized companies survive. But when the government absorbs that cost, the company operating the plant does not need to recover it through the price of its chips. It can sell at whatever price wins the contract. And if that price is below what competitors can match without losing money, then competitors start losing money. Then they start losing market share. Then they start shutting down. We have seen this movie before, and the ending is not subtle. Cast your mind back to the early 2000s. Solar energy was a technology being pioneered in Germany, the United States, and Japan. Western companies built the panels, developed the science, and established the market. Then China arrived. With state financing, subsidized manufacturing, and a strategy built entirely on scale and price, not innovation and efficiency. Within a decade, Chinese solar panel manufacturers had driven the cost of solar panels down by over 80%. That sounds like a win for the planet. It was. But it was also the near-complete destruction of Western solar manufacturing capacity. Dozens of companies went bankrupt. Entire industrial ecosystems collapsed. And today, China controls approximately 80% of global solar panel manufacturing. 80%. One country, one strategic industry. A near-total monopoly built through patience and subsidized production. The semiconductor industry is following the same playbook. And the world is watching it happen again in slow motion in real time. You might be thinking, fine, just build more chip factories at home. Slap some tariffs on Chinese chips and problem solved. If only it were that simple. Building a semiconductor factory in the United States takes, on average, nearly twice as long as building one in parts of Asia. Regulatory approvals, environmental reviews, permitting processes, labor negotiations. These are not bureaucratic annoyances. They are structural disadvantages built into the system over decades. Construction costs in the United States are significantly higher. Operating costs are higher. Even with the CHIPS Act, which allocated approximately $52 billion to domestic semiconductor manufacturing in 2022, the economics remain difficult. Several companies that initially committed to building American plants have already revised timelines, scaled back plans, or quietly walked back commitments. Meanwhile, China is completing new fabrication plants at a pace that makes American timelines look almost leisurely. Speed matters in this game. Every year of delay is another year of market share lost. Another year of dependency deepening. Another year of leverage accumulating on the other side. And tariffs? Let us talk about why tariffs are a much blunter instrument than politicians suggest. Semiconductors are almost never sold directly to consumers. They are embedded components. They go inside finished goods. A Chinese-made legacy chip might go into a factory in Vietnam, which assembles a sensor, which gets installed in a German appliance, which gets shipped to an American retailer. By the time that chip reaches you, it has crossed multiple borders, changed hands multiple times, and been transformed into something that looks nothing like a chip. Tracking it through that supply chain is technically complex, economically expensive, and practically near impossible at scale. Tariffs on finished goods create their own problem. Raise the price of imported appliances or vehicles to protect domestic industry, and the cost lands directly on consumers. Families pay more for washing machines, cars, and medical devices. The political pain is immediate and visible. The strategic benefit is slow and uncertain. This is the trap. There is no clean solution. Every option carries a cost. And while democracies debate the least bad option, authoritarian systems with long planning horizons just keep building. This brings us to the question that should genuinely concern you. What happens if this continues another 10 years without a serious response? The answer is dependency. Total, structural, inescapable dependency. If the factories that make legacy chips in other regions close because they cannot compete on price, rebuilding that capacity does not happen in months. It happens in years, if it happens at all. Equipment lead times alone can stretch 18 months or more. Training skilled workers takes time. Re-establishing supplier ecosystems takes time. And during all of that time, there is one dominant supplier. A supplier that knows you cannot say no. A supplier that can name its price, set its terms, and in a moment of geopolitical tension, simply decide to slow down shipments. You would not need a military blockade. You would not need sanctions. You would just need to make a phone call or not make one. And watch what happens to car production in the United States, or hospital equipment in Europe, or communication infrastructure across Southeast Asia. Control the simple chips. Control the world. That is not a thriller premise. That is a strategic reality unfolding right now. So what does this mean for you? What can an ordinary person actually take away from a story about chips and subsidies and geopolitical maneuvering? Here is the practical lesson. The things that shape your life are rarely the things that dominate the headlines. The flashy technology, the record-breaking innovation, the trillion-dollar company, these capture attention. But the real leverage lives in the infrastructure nobody notices until it disappears. Supply chains, power grids, water systems, foundational components. The boring stuff. The stuff that works so reliably you forget it exists. That is where dependency forms. That is where control accumulates. And that is where vulnerability hides. As a consumer, as a citizen, as someone who drives a car and uses a hospital and relies on a power grid, understanding this matters. Because the decisions being made in semiconductor policy today will shape the options available to your country a decade from now. Whether your government invests in rebuilding domestic capacity now, while it is painful but possible, or waits until it is necessary and nearly impossible. This is not fear-mongering. This is pattern recognition. We watched it happen in solar. We watched it happen in pharmaceuticals, where the United States now depends on foreign sources for a significant share of its generic drug ingredients. We watched it happen in rare earth materials. The playbook is not new. Only the industry changes. The race for technological supremacy is real. But the race that could quietly determine who wins it is happening in factories making chips that cost less than $1. And right now, one side is running a great deal faster than the other. If this story made you think differently about something you walked past 100 times without noticing, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. The conversation about technology and power is too important to leave only to politicians and executives. And if you want more stories like this, told plainly without the spin, subscribe to this channel. Because the most important things happening in the world right now are almost never the ones being shouted the loudest. They are the quiet ones, the foundational ones, the ones that cost less than $1.